Good morning to all our distinguished guests, as well as ladies and gentlemen. So today I will be speaking to you on the first theme of the survey report, which is on the interest in and knowledge of science and technology, as well as the environment. So the presentation will cover a brief overview and we'll go through the awareness of and the interest in achievements in science and technology, and then we'll go through science knowledge as well as the priority science areas, as well as science knowledge and concern about the natural and environmental events, and we'll cover some of the key outcomes and the conclusion. So the interest and knowledge of science and technology are two of the indicators that provide an insight into the nature of the relationship between the public and science, and they also further influence the extent of science engagement. I think all the past speakers have spoken towards why do we need a constructive relationship between science and the public, briefly around the fact that it ensures that the public are informed about science and technology, which may offer solutions for developmental challenges such as energy, water, as well as the increasing impacts of climate change. It also stimulates the interest of science and technology in subject areas and careers. It also increases the public participation in science and policy formulation and adoption, as it had been mentioned prior. So So this survey, as well as this section, aimed to establish the levels of awareness, interest, knowledge, and concern of science and technology in the environment and environmental events. It also aimed to identify and the characteristics of who were more likely to be interested in and knowledgeable about science and the environment. And lastly, it aimed to investigate the relationship between the interest and knowledge of science and technology and the knowledge and concern about the environment. So those are the main 3 points that we'll be discussing and looking at. I think briefly it has been explained a brief around what do we mean in this report around what is interest. And on interest, we mean wanting to know more. And in terms of knowledge, it refers to the information that the user already possesses. And in terms of awareness, it indicates being informed, even though not necessarily with understanding. So that also covers a little bit about why science is important, particularly around the importance of science in improving the quality of life of individuals as well as their well-being, particularly at addressing one of the most pertinent challenges, particularly in South Africa, around energy. As we know, we are undergoing an energy crisis. We are also undergoing a water crisis, particularly in the Johannesburg areas. As well as broadly around the country, there are various provinces experiencing increasing levels of water shortages. And recently we have been also experiencing increasing climate impacts, including floods as well as droughts on the different and various parts of the country. And secondly, I think it has been explained also why it is important that the public is aware of science as it increases public participation in policy formulation. And there has been a number of policies that have been enacted in the country around energy, around climate, around finance, around broadly the just transition, in which it is important that the public participate in and understand. And then looking at the awareness of and the interest in and achievements in science and technology, we can see that the survey results have shown that around 66% of individuals, excuse me, think the slides are a bit far for me to see. Rather than, let me use my, right. Yeah, so the around 60%, 66% of the individuals were interested generally in general science and technology, and 60% were found to be aware of science and technology, while 56% were aware of science and technology internationally. And secondly, the survey looked at who was more likely to be interested in South Africa's science and technology. And we have seen that from the results that the people who are more interested are those that hold higher degrees, that have had access to higher learning institutions, and they come from homes where there is high educational support, and these are people from the age of 16 and 34, and they are male, and they are black. Mostly it's dominated by black African adults, and these are from the richer socioeconomic status in society. And we have seen that in contrast, those with low interest are primarily those with only primary education or lower, and they are from homes with low educational support, and these are also labor inactive individuals and also colored adults and others. And then when it comes to science knowledge, the survey measured the level of science knowledge among the public to establish how well the public understood some of the science facts and concepts. A number of questions were administered to the public, and the responses required were true or false statements. And these ranged from various subjects that the society interacts with daily, such as the petrol price in the country, COVID-19 vaccine, as well as questions related to genetics, questions related to antibiotics, questions related to climate change. And the results have shown that lower scores were observed for questions that required cognitively demanding statements, such as those in genetics and those in antibiotics, whereas higher scores were found for items that the public engaged with on a daily basis, and those particularly revolves around petrol as well as other daily needs. And then the survey also looked at who was now most likely and less likely to achieve high knowledge scores. And we can see that the high knowledge scores were obtained from individuals that were white, Indian, and Asian adults, and they were male. And these came from very high education support homes, and they hold higher degree qualifications, as well as live in urban formal areas, and some were medium to high religiosity. And in contrast, we can see that the low knowledge is found on females. They are black, African, and coloreds with no formal education or only primary education, and they are also labor inactive. So we see a shift and a complete contrast when it comes to the individuals who are less likely to achieve high science knowledge scores. And the survey also looked at how at the changes in science knowledge over the years by comparing this survey to other previous surveys. What these results showed is that there is a very modest improvement when it comes to how has science knowledge shifted over time. And also the results were also compared to those from other countries such as the UK and the US, and they showed that South Africa is lagging behind when it comes to to science knowledge in comparison to the UK and the US. However, comparisons are difficult to do because there are significant differences in terms of how the items are phrased and how the sample, in terms of the sample and the interview mode, as well as the context and the differences in context between South Africa and these countries. The survey also looked at some of these priority science areas, and the report explored the public interest in and the knowledge of contemporary societal challenges that require interventions of science and technologies. And these ranged from space and stars, advanced technologies, the environmental issues, health issues, internet and communications, quality food, energy, as well as cleaner water, as well as the quality of education. And what these results showed is that the public had high interest as well as high knowledge when it comes to water, electricity, and education. This is not surprising because these are issues that the public deals with on a daily basis, and these are highly publicized in media as well. And that the lowest levels of knowledge and interest were particularly on space and stars, as well as advanced technology, as these are the areas that require more cognitive thinking. Particularly around, there needs to be improvement, particularly around improving knowledge and interest in the more cognitive areas, as it has been shown by these results. The reports also further implored or investigated who is more likely to have this high knowledge, as well as who is more likely to be interested in the priority areas. Similarly, what we see here is that the higher percentage of knowledge was found to be dominated by white, Indian, and Asian males between the ages of 16 to 34. And these individuals also contained higher degrees, and they were from the richest socioeconomic system, and they were also from very high they were from high educational support homes, and they were from high to medium religiously. And then we can see the complete opposite when it comes to the low knowledge, where we see that females were more likely, and Black and African and colored with no formal education are the ones that received the low percentage of knowledge. And then when it comes to the interest, in the priority areas, similarly, males, Indian, Asian, Black, Africans, as well as white males were more interested in these priority areas, and these are similarly individuals with higher degrees that have access to higher learning, and they were from richest households, as well as live in urban and formal as well as rural areas. Whereas when it comes to the low interest, we can see that females are still the ones with the low interest when it comes to priority science areas, and these are from the poorest households, and they come from low educational support homes. Secondly, the third element that the survey looked at is the knowledge and concern about the natural environment. I think the increasing awareness and impacts of climate and other environmental challenges have necessitated that the public that the public is more aware and concerned about the environment. And these results showed that overall the public is very concerned about the environment, as we can see from the graph that the scores for concern were overall larger or more than those for knowledge across the various factors that were investigated, and these include water pollution, air pollution, droughts, and water shortages, floods, as well as soil erosion. And amongst these, water pollution was the one with the highest scores, and this is one of the challenges that the public interacts with on a daily basis as we are experiencing a water crisis in the country. And then secondly, in terms of the levels of the environmental knowledge and environmental concern, it is shown that a high population is very much concerned with, is very much knowledgeable and as well as concerned about the environment. And in addition, modeling studies were conducted to complement this research, and these showed that adults with higher environmental knowledge are more likely to have higher environmental concern, as well as vice versa to that. And secondly, the survey also looked at who was more likely to have this higher knowledge and concern when it comes to environmental events. And what we are seeing from these results is also that those with higher knowledge are males across a various spectrum of ages, from 16 to 54 years, and they are predominantly white, Indian, Asian, and they hold higher degrees, and they are from medium to high educational support homes, and they are from rich households as well, and they have high to medium religiosity. And when it comes to lower knowledge, we are seeing the complete opposite of that, where we are seeing that it is dominated by females that are black or colored, and they have predominantly primary school education to none, and they are unemployed or labor inactive. And then when it comes to environmental concern, we can see that everyone is largely concerned about the environment. As you can see that Indian, Asian, Black Africans, as well as white adults, as well as those from formal areas, from urban areas and rural areas, are also concerned about the environment. And then when it comes to low concern, it's a similar pattern where we see that those with primary school or no formal education are the least concerns, and they are largely from poor household, as well as very much labor inactive. So in summary, I think this survey has shown that the public were more knowledgeable on items that had dominated the news cycle, and that there is evidence and improvement modestly across in terms of knowledge over time in the country, but that also needs to be improved. It also showed that the public were more knowledgeable and interested in topics that reflect some of their unmet basic needs, and that the lowest level of knowledge and interest were found on topics that were far removed from people's daily lives. And largely, there are gaps in the basic scientific knowledge among South Africans, and that is an area that needs to be improved. And a large subset of the population remains concerned about the environment, even if they lack the deep understanding in terms of knowledge and expertise in the subject. And also the socio-demographic factors had an influence on who is interested in science and technology, as well as environmental knowledge and concerns. And this shows that the persistent inequalities in the country remains a challenge, particularly for science technology uptake. And in that context, I think it is important that we interrogate what needs to happen in South Africa to increase this knowledge and concern about the natural environment amongst the public, as well as what needs to happen to help people to understand the promise of modern science and technology. Thank you very much.